I just found out my wife of 10 years secretly borrowed $250, $0 using our joint account, then convinced her brother to forge my signature on the property deed so she could sell the family home behind my back. Now she's claiming I'm the liar in a court battle over everything, and I don't know who to trust anymore. I never thought I'd be sitting here, writing a story like this, but here I am. The thing is, my wife, Lisa, was always the kind of woman who could charm her way out of any situation. She's beautiful, confident, and manipulative as hell. We've been married for 10 years, and I thought I knew her inside out. Turns out I didn't know her at all. The bombshell hit me when I started noticing small things, texts on her phone that she'd hide, late nights she claimed were work, and a strange new attitude that made her sneer whenever I mentioned money or our future. But nothing prepared me for the actual shock. Finding out she borrowed $250, $0 from our joint account without telling me, then convinced her brother, Mike, to forge my signature on the property deed so she could sell the family home behind my back. It all unraveled in a matter of days. I was going through our bank statements just trying to get a grip on our finances after a recent argument about her spending habits. That's when I saw it, an enormous withdrawal, $250, $0, labeled as loan repayment from our joint account. My stomach dropped. I immediately called the bank, but the details were vague. No official loan, no paperwork, no explanation. It was like she just siphoned off money like it was nothing. When I confronted her about it, Lisa brushed me off, saying I was overreacting, that I didn't understand business, and that I shouldn't worry my pretty little head about it. But I knew better. This was a red flag, and I couldn't ignore it. The next day, I started digging deeper. I found out she'd been talking to her brother, Mike, more often than usual. Every conversation they had seemed secretive, and her phone was full of texts from him. I got suspicious and decided to check her messages, something I hated to do, but I had to know the truth. What I found was worse than I imagined. There were dozens of texts between Lisa and Mike, mostly about the deal, the property, and the money. I saw plans being laid out, details about the sale of the house, and even a message from Lisa telling Mike to forge my signature on the deed. I couldn't breathe. My wife, the woman I'd trusted with my life, was orchestrating this behind my back. I felt sick. It was like the ground had shifted beneath me. How could she do this? How could she lie so easily? I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. I didn't even want to confront her yet. I needed proof, solid proof, that she was cheating on me and scheming to take everything I cared about. That night I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd been so blind. How could she pretend everything was fine while she was planning her escape? I kept asking myself if I'd missed the signs, if I'd been a terrible husband, or if she'd just been a master manipulator all along. The next morning, I decided I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I needed answers. I called her into the living room, trying to keep my voice steady, but inside I was boiling. When she walked in, her eyes were cold and she smirked like she already knew she'd won. I asked her outright about the money, the sale, the forged signature. Her reaction was a mixture of anger and denial. She told me I was imagining things, that I was paranoid, that I was making up stories because I didn't want to face the truth, whatever that meant. But I had seen the texts, the bank withdrawals, the lies. I knew she'd been lying all along. I felt my blood pressure spike. The betrayal cut deeper than I could ever explain. My wife, the woman I'd loved and trusted, had been secretly plotting to take everything from me. She had lied about her fidelity too, I was sure of it. I'd always suspected she was hiding something, but this was beyond anything I'd expected. I was angry, yes, but mostly I was devastated. How could she do this? How could she betray me, cheat on me, then try to steal our home and our money? My mind was racing, trying to process everything, wondering if I was losing my mind or if I was just finally seeing her true face. I didn't know what to do next. The house, the money, the marriage, it all felt like it was crumbling in my hands. I knew I had to decide whether to fight for her, for what was left of our life, or to walk away and start over. But one thing was clear, I couldn't trust her anymore, not even a little, and I had a sinking feeling that this was just the beginning of a much darker story. After that confrontation, everything changed. The house felt colder, The walls seemed to close in on me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been played for a fool. I spent days trying to piece together what was real and what was lies. The more I dug, the clearer it became. Lisa had been planning this for months, maybe longer. She'd hidden her true intentions behind a facade of a perfect marriage, but now I saw her for who she really was. I started to realize that this wasn't just about the money or the house. It was about control, betrayal, and a profound sense of betrayal that cut so deep I wasn't sure I'd ever recover. One thing that kept gnawing at me was her attitude, bitchy, dismissive, and full of lies. Every time I asked her about the money, she'd turn it around, accuse me of being paranoid or insecure. She'd say I was just jealous because she'd been working late or talking to her brother, but I knew better. I had seen the texts, the forged signatures, and the way she'd lied to my face. She kept insisting she was innocent, that she was just trying to fix our financial mess, but I didn't buy it. I could see the scheming behind her eyes, the glint of someone who had already decided she was going to take everything and leave me holding the bag. I decided I needed to get proof, something concrete that I could use if I decided to fight her in court or just expose her to everyone. I hired a private investigator, which was a huge step for me, but I needed to know if she was cheating on me too. That's when I found out for sure. Lisa had been sneaking around, meeting some guy, another affair, I guess. I saw pictures of her with him, holding hands, going out to dinner, even staying at a hotel one night. It all clicked into place. She'd been lying about her business trips, her late nights, her stress. She wasn't just stealing our money and scheming on the house. She was also cheating on me with some guy she met through her brother. That was the final blow. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. How could she do this? How could she betray me so completely? I thought I knew her, but now I realized I'd been living with a stranger. I'd given her 10 years of my life, my trust, my love, and she'd repaid me with lies, theft, and a side piece. The anger was overwhelming, but beneath that anger was a deep sadness, because I loved her, or at least I thought I did. Now I wasn't sure what I was feeling anymore. All I knew was that I couldn't stay quiet. I had to do something. That's when I started making plans. I couldn't let her get away with this. If she thought she could sell the house, steal the money, and cheat on me without consequences, she was dead wrong. I started gathering evidence, screenshots, bank statements, the texts with her brother, the hotel receipts, everything. I also reached out to a lawyer, someone who could help me understand my rights and what options I had. I wasn't just going to walk away, not without a fight. She crossed a line, and I was going to make sure she paid for it. Over the next few days, I became obsessed with the idea of revenge, not just legal, but emotional too. I wanted her to see that I wasn't the fool she thought I was. I wanted her to feel the pain of betrayal, the loss of everything she'd tried to steal from me. I started planning how I'd confront her again, what I'd say, how I'd expose her lies. I knew I couldn't trust her anymore. The woman I'd loved and married was gone, replaced by someone cold, manipulative, and willing to ruin everything for her own gain. That realization was the hardest part. I'd been played, used, and discarded, and now I had to figure out what my next move was, whether to fight for what was left or walk away and rebuild from the ruins she left behind. The more I thought about everything, the clearer it became that I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. Lisa's lies had gone too far, and her plans to sell the house behind my back, drain our savings, and cheat on me with some guy she met through her brother, that was beyond betrayal. I kept replaying her words, her sneers, her fake tears when I confronted her the first time. She'd spun this web of lies so well, I almost believed her at some point. But now there was no doubt. She was a liar, a thief, and a cheat, and I had to do something about it. I decided to hit back hard. First, I called a lawyer I'd found who specialized in property and financial crimes. I explained everything: the $250, $0 withdrawal, her convincing her brother to forge my signature, the secret sale of the house, her affair. The lawyer listened carefully and then told me that I had a solid case for criminal and civil action. I was relieved but also furious. I knew I had to act fast before she managed to liquidate everything or disappear with her lover. I also reached out to a private investigator who confirmed what I suspected. Lisa had been sneaking around with this guy for months. They'd even been planning to run away together using the money she'd stolen. While all this was happening, I started to prepare myself emotionally. I was torn between rage and heartbreak. I'd loved her, or at least I thought I did. But now I saw her for what she truly was, a manipulative, selfish woman who would do anything to get what she wanted. I felt betrayed on every level. The trust I had in her was shattered. I thought about all the nights I'd come home exhausted, only to find her secretive texts or her sneering at my concerns. How many times had I overlooked the signs? How many times had I excused her behavior? The pain was like a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. One night I decided I needed to confront her again, but this time I was prepared. I told her I knew everything: the loan, the forged signature, her affair, the plans to sell the house. Her reaction was classic. She looked surprised, then furious. She started yelling, calling me paranoid, insecure, jealous. She claimed I was making everything up, that I was trying to control her. She even had the nerve to accuse me of cheating myself, saying I was just too blind to see her side of things. That's when I lost it. I told her she'd lied to my face for years, that she'd conned me, and that I wasn't going to let her get away with it. She looked at me with that bitchy sneer and said, "You're just jealous because I have a life outside of you. Maybe if you weren't so boring, you'd understand." That was the moment I realized I'd been married to a master manipulator. She was trying to turn everything around on me, make me look like the bad guy, but I knew the truth. I was the victim here. I'd been lied to and used. I couldn't believe I'd ever trusted her with my life. After that, I decided I had to act decisively. I told her I was going to take legal action, report her to the authorities, and make sure she paid for what she'd done. I also told her I was filing for divorce. No way I was going to stay married to someone who had betrayed me so completely. Her face twisted into a look of pure disdain, and she spat, "You'll regret this. Nobody leaves Lisa. I always get what I want." That was the last straw. I knew I had to get out of there to protect myself and whatever was left of my sanity. In the following days, I moved out of the house, leaving her behind to stew in her own lies. I hired a team to secure the property, change the locks, and gather even more evidence of her schemes. I contacted the bank, the lawyer, and the police to file reports. The whole thing was surreal. I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I kept asking myself how I'd missed the signs, how I'd let her get away with so much. But I also knew that I couldn't let her destroy me. I was going to fight for what was mine, for my dignity, and for the truth. Every day since then has been I feel angry, betrayed, but also a strange sense of relief that I finally see her for who she really is. I've learned that sometimes the people you love the most can hurt you the deepest, and that trust, once broken, is almost impossible to repair. But I also know that I have to move on. I have to rebuild my life from the ashes of this disaster. And I will. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing: I will never let anyone do this to me again. The aftermath of everything hit me harder than I expected. Moving out of the house, securing my personal property, and dealing with the legal mess felt like trying to hold water in my hands. No matter how tight I clenched, it kept slipping away. I was angry, yes, but mostly I was numb. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind for so long. Lisa's bitchy smirk, her constant lies, everything now seemed like a carefully crafted illusion. I kept asking myself how I hadn't seen it all sooner, how I'd been so naive to trust her. The betrayal cut so deep I wondered if I'd ever feel normal again. I threw myself into the legal process. The lawyer explained that with the evidence I had, her texts, the forged signature, the bank withdrawals, I had a solid case to fight for the house, the money, and even for her to be held accountable criminally. But what bothered me the most was that she was trying to spin everything around, claiming I was the one at fault. On the phone, she'd scream that I was a controlling, jealous husband who just couldn't handle her success. She'd tell everyone that I was the liar, the one who'd been cheating on her and trying to ruin her reputation. Her words stung, but I knew the truth. I had the evidence and I was ready to fight. In the meantime, I started to see the full extent of her manipulations. Turns out she'd been cheating on me for months, maybe longer, with some guy named Chad, some guy her brother introduced her to at a party. I found out through a mutual friend who saw her and Chad together at a hotel, acting like a couple. That was the final nail in the coffin. She lied about her business trips, her stress, all of it just cover stories for her secret life. The realization that she'd been screwing around behind my back, while also scheming to steal my house and money, made me feel sick. I'd loved her, or so I thought. But now I saw her as nothing but a con artist who'd used me like a pawn. I felt like I was losing my mind. How could someone I'd trusted so completely do this? I kept replaying every moment, every conversation, every glance she'd given me. Was I really that blind? Did I miss all the signs? I wondered if I'd ever be able to trust anyone again. The pain was overwhelming, but I also knew I had to keep my focus. I couldn't let her take everything, my house, my savings, my dignity. I was determined to make her pay, not just financially but emotionally. I wanted her to understand that her actions had consequences, that betrayal like this doesn't go unpunished. One night I sat in my new apartment, staring at the walls that used to be our home. I thought about all the years we'd spent together, the plans we'd made, the dreams we'd shared. It felt like a bad joke now. I'd been so proud of building that life with her, only to find out she'd been planning her escape the entire time. She convinced her brother to forge my signature, sold the house behind my back, and was now claiming I'd lied about everything. I'd never felt so betrayed in my life. The anger simmered beneath my skin, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. I was finally seeing her true face, and I knew I had to let go of the past to move forward. I started focusing on myself. I went to therapy, not just to cope, but to understand how I'd let this happen. I realized I'd been too trusting, too eager to believe in the best in people. But now I knew better. Trust is fragile, and once broken, it's almost impossible to repair. I also learned that revenge, in some cases, isn't about hurting the other person but about reclaiming your power. I might not be able to undo what she did, but I could regain control of my life. I cut off all contact with her, blocked her number, and told her to stay away. I also made it clear that I was fighting to get back what was mine, and I wasn't going to let her destroy me. As I write this, I realize that I'm starting to heal, even if it's slow. The pain still lingers, but I'm learning to live with it. I've come to understand that some people are just good at hiding their true nature until it's too late. But I also know that I'm stronger than I thought. I don't need her approval or her lies to define me. I'll rebuild piece by piece, and someday I hope to find peace again. Because at the end of the day, the only person I truly need to trust now is myself. And that's what I plan to do, trust again, but more carefully this time. The months that followed were some of the hardest in my life, but also the most revealing. I threw myself into the legal battle, pored over every document, every piece of evidence I had collected. Each day was some days I'd wake up feeling hopeful, convinced I'd get justice. Other days I'd wake up feeling exhausted, questioning whether I'd ever be able to trust again. Lisa's lies kept echoing in my mind, her sneering face, the way she'd manipulate every situation to her advantage. I started to realize that her entire life was built on deception, and I'd been blind to it for far too long. I'd known. She was bitchy, manipulative, and extremely good at twisting the truth, but her capacity for lying still shocked me. She told everyone that I was the one cheating, that I was the one stealing from her, that I was a controlling husband. Meanwhile, she was out with Chad, scheming to sell the house and draining our bank accounts. Her lies were endless, and I saw her spin stories to people, her family, friends, anyone who would listen. She'd claim I was the villain, that I was paranoid, that I was trying to ruin her reputation. But I had the evidence, and I was determined to expose her. One thing I didn't expect was the emotional toll this was taking on me. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry, so angry that I wanted to lash out. I'd catch myself staring at her pictures, remembering the good times, wondering how someone so charming could be so dark inside. At night, I'd lie awake, replaying every moment, trying to understand how I'd missed the signs. How had she managed to keep this all hidden for so long? I'd trusted her with my life, and now I felt like a fool. Still, I knew I had to hold it together for my own sake and for the chance of reclaiming what was mine. The legal process moved slowly, but I stayed vigilant. I hired private investigators to keep tabs on her, just to make sure she wasn't trying to run away or hide the evidence. I also worked on building a case for the court, proof of the forged signature, the unauthorized loan, and her affair. I knew that once I had everything in order, I could finally confront her in court and get some measure of justice. But even that didn't quell the deep pain inside. Every day I felt like I was losing a part of myself, my trust, my sense of security, my marriage. Then came the moment I dreaded most, the court hearing. I sat there, nervous but determined, watching her walk in with that bitchy smirk she always wore when she thought she was winning. She tried to play the victim, claiming I was the one lying and cheating, that she was the innocent one. Her voice was icy, full of lies, and I could see through every word. I wanted to scream, to shout that she'd betrayed me, that she'd stolen our home, that she'd been screwing around with Chad behind my back. But I stayed silent, letting the evidence do the talking. When the judge finally looked at the facts, it was clear who was in the wrong. That day, I finally got a partial victory. The court ordered her to return the house and some of the stolen money, but I knew this wasn't the end. Lisa was already scheming her next move, probably preparing to appeal or find some way to weasel out of her responsibilities. I also realized that even if I won legally, I'd lost something much deeper: my trust, my marriage, my sense of safety. I wasn't sure I'd ever get those back, but I did learn something. I was stronger than I thought. I'd survived her lies, her manipulations, her betrayal, and I was determined to move forward no matter how painful it was. Looking back, I see how naive I'd been. I thought I was building a life with someone I loved, but all along, she'd been planning her escape. I learned that people can hide who they really are behind a mask of charm and beauty, and that sometimes the biggest lies are the ones we tell ourselves. I also learned that revenge isn't always about hurting the other person. Sometimes it's about reclaiming your dignity, your peace, and your future. I may have lost my wife, my home, and my trust, but I haven't lost myself. And that's what matters most. I'll keep rebuilding, one step at a time, knowing that I survived something most wouldn't. And someday I hope to find happiness again, free from the betrayal that nearly destroyed me. Now, sitting here months later, I can honestly say I've come a long way from the guy I was when I first discovered her lies. The pain still lingers, but it's different now, more like a distant echo than a constant ache. I've learned some hard lessons about trust, about how people can hide their true nature behind a pretty face, and about the importance of protecting myself, financially and emotionally. I've also realized that revenge isn't just about getting back what's lost. It's about reclaiming your life and your dignity after someone tries to destroy it. Looking back, I see how naive I was to believe that love meant total blind trust. Lisa's bitchiness, her lies, her manipulations, they all prove that some people are just masters at deception. I was so caught up in the idea of us being a perfect couple that I ignored the warning signs. She'd always been good at twisting words, convincing me I was the one with the problem and making herself look like the victim. I see now that her charm was just a mask, hiding a person who was willing to do anything to get what she wanted: money, power, control. And she almost succeeded. But I also learned that even in the face of betrayal, you have a choice. You can let it destroy you, or you can use it as a wake-up call. I chose the latter. I fought back with everything I had: legal action, evidence, and the truth. And in the end, I got some measure of justice. Not just for the house or the money, but for myself. I refused to let her win by breaking me completely. I've started to rebuild my life, piece by piece, and I don't regret standing up for myself. The hardest part was accepting that I might never fully trust again. But I also understand that trust, once broken, can sometimes be rebuilt, carefully and slowly. I've learned to be more cautious, more aware, and more willing to protect my heart and my assets. I don't have her anymore, and honestly, I don't want her back. What I want is peace, peace of mind, peace of heart. And I know that I'll find it someday, maybe not right now, but eventually. To anyone going through something similar, trust your instincts. Don't ignore the red flags. If someone is lying, stealing, or cheating, they're not worth your pain. Stand up for yourself, get the evidence, and don't be afraid to fight for what's rightfully yours. It's not easy and the path is messy, but in the end, you'll come out stronger. I've learned that betrayal can teach you a lot about yourself, what you're capable of, what you deserve, and how to be smarter about who you let into your life. So here I am, finally ready to move on. The scars will stay, but they'll remind me of what I survived. I've learned that revenge doesn't always mean hurting someone else. Sometimes it's about getting your life back. And that's exactly what I've done. I've reclaimed my dignity, my home, and my future. I may have lost a lot, but I gained something far more valuable, hope. And I know now that no matter how dark things get, there's always a way out, as long as you're willing to fight for it.